my name is Reagan Starks. I am the Program Director for the Baseball Heritage Museum. I'm here with Wade Pearsall. He is a Cleveland Buckeyes historian, and he's going to be giving us a talk about the Buckeyes, specifically the 1945 Cleveland Buckeyes. I will leave him to it.
All right. I want to thank everyone who's watching. I want to thank the fine people at the Baseball Heritage Museum for asking me to come here. This is a great place if you haven't been here. If you're a baseball fan or live in Cleveland, feel free to come by. League Park to me is sacred ground as a baseball fan. Anytime I'm on the east side of town, I live downtown, I'll drive by here and just appreciate the fact that the great players of baseball in the first half century of last year played here, as well as the Negro League Teams. So this is just, like I said, to a baseball fan like myself, this is the League Park is sacred ground. I want to, first of all, I do a lot of Negro League research, primarily the Cleveland Buckeyes. If you want more information, you can always go to clevelandbuckeyesbaseball.com. That's my website. And I was privileged to talk today about the Cleveland Buckeyes. And the first thing I usually like to talk about, before we talk about the Cleveland Buckeyes themselves, is the Negro Leagues in general. I think there's some misconception about how these teams operated. We're so used to Major League Baseball and its very meticulous standings, scheduling. The Negro League teams go back to an era where if you wanted to see baseball, you had to go see it. So there were a lot of teams that played locally, and the Negro League teams, including the Cleveland Buckeyes, it would not be unusual for them, like on a Monday, to go to Syracuse and play a game or two, go to Buffalo the next day and play a couple games in Erie, and then even play a couple games in Akron against teams that were local to the area. And they would also play Negro League teams in exhibition games. To kind of show you how the difference between the Negro Leagues are and the Major Leagues are at that time and even now is, we're going to talk about the 1945 World Champion Cleveland Buckeyes, but some of those games in the World Series were actually scheduled at neutral fields, and the Buckeyes started the World Series here in League Park, played their first game here, but the next day they went down to Dayton with the Homestead Grays and played an exhibition game. It'd almost be like last year in Washington and Houston playing in the World Series, and instead of game two, the two teams going to El Paso and playing an exhibition game. So there was, to underscore this point, the Cleveland Buckeyes won that World Series in Philadelphia. Game 4, they swept the series against the Homestead Grays. So what was their reward after they beat the Homestead Grays in Philadelphia in Game 4 of the World Series? Well, they had to go back and play a second game because they also agreed to play the Philadelphia Stars in an exhibition game. So these teams did not have the strict schedule major leaguers had, and certainly don't have the statistics that major leagues, the major league players have always had. And it's been difficult to find records of these players. But anyway, so that's the kind of a history of how the Negro Leagues were compared to the major leagues as we know them. Now, one of the teams I want to talk about is the Cleveland Buckeyes. The Cleveland Buckeyes were owned by a gentleman named Ernie Wright, and he was from Erie, and he owned the team in 1942 and was split between Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Hilldale in Pennsylvania. But in 1943, he committed to having the team play all its games here in Cleveland from 1943 to 1948. And as someone who's done research now of the Negro Leagues, it's frustrating to see how little the Cleveland Buckeyes are recognized in the Negro League by Negro League historians. And it's not their fault, it's just this team is not that well known. But in 1945, we had a great team here in Cleveland. There's a picture here of a gentleman named Quincy Troop. Now, Quincy Troop, or Troupé, he was born with only one P in his name, and is pronounced Troop. But he played ball in Mexico for a period of time and added a second P because he wanted to sound more Mexican, and so people started pronouncing his name Quincy Troupé. He was a manager catcher for the Cleveland Buckeyes from 1945 through 1947. Now, he was also a great scout. One of the players I want to mention is the shortstop for the Cleveland Buckeyes was a gentleman named Avelino Canizares. He was Cuban. And Quincy Troupe signed him to play for the Buckeyes for 1945. And the interesting thing about Avelino Canizares, he was Hispanic, and there are a number of Hispanic ball players that played in the Negro Leagues that have also been forgotten. And there's actually a group out there that researches Hispanic ball players, because the Hispanic ball players that played in the regular major leagues are well known. But Avelino Canizares played 1 year for the Buckeyes, and then he went to Mexico. There's a great local author named Scott Longert who writes about Cleveland Indians, and I believe his book's coming out about the war years, and he's going to talk about how Mexican teams, in a sense, raided the major leagues for players, and a number of players, both black and Hispanic and white, went to Mexico for a few years after the war. But that was one of Quincy Troupe's great contributions, is he signed great ball players. He had a great baseball mind. Sadly, he never played in the major leagues except for 1 year. He played for the Indians in 1952, but only appeared in a few games. As a catcher, so many of the white pitchers did not particularly care to throw to a black catcher. I think some of the white pitchers for the Indians basically said to him, don't bother giving me a sign, I'm going to throw what I want, you just catch it. So his time here was short-lived, but he did finally get to the major leagues, which was probably the goal of so many of these black ball players. But the person I want to talk most about from that 1945 season and his career with the Cleveland Buckeyes is a gentleman named Sam Jethro. Sam Jethro may be the greatest hitter to wear a Cleveland Major League uniform. And he regularly led the Negro Leagues in hitting, and he was one of the players that was interviewed by Branch Rickey to possibly break the color barrier. Sam Jethro's big sin, or his big flaw that Branch Rickey found in him, was he smoked cigarettes. And Branch Rickey felt he was probably looking for someone who was just super clean and had very few flaws. And as I have no doubt that Jackie Robinson didn't smoke cigarettes, but I would have to guess that somewhere in his career, like so many ball players, he probably endorsed a cigarette. But Sam Jethro was, that's how well he was recognized in baseball for his baseball skills. Now, there's also a time in 1945 where in Boston, during that era, there was a movement to try to get baseball to integrate. It was a big social movement, and baseball resisted for a long time, obviously. But in 1945, a local councilman in the city of Boston threatened the Red Sox to take their Sunday liquor license away if they did not take some steps towards integrating. And so what the Red Sox did in 1945, they invited Jackie Robinson, a Philadelphia Star shortstop named Marvin Williams, and Sam Jethro to try out, in a sense, for the Boston Red Sox. And they pitched against local high school pitching. Sam Jethro wore his Cleveland Buckeyes uniform to the workout, but it was all it was. It was just something to appease the local politicians, and nothing ever came of it. And the Negro press didn't think there was anything really to report on. And the ironic part of that story is that the Boston Red Sox were the last team to integrate. They didn't integrate till 1959. I think everybody knows the name of the gentleman that finally integrated the team. It was Pupsy Green. He was called up during 1959 when he was injured, when their other second baseman was injured. But Sam Jethro, he was just a great ball player, regularly led the Negro League in batting statistics. And if anyone belongs in the Hall of Fame, it's Sam Jethro. I know he was recently put into the International League Hall of Fame. But to give you a sense of how good a ball player he was, in 1948, he was signed by the Brooklyn Dodgers, and that was kind of the death knell to the Buckeyes, because the best black ball players were starting to get picked up by the major league teams. In 1950, Sam Jethro was traded to the Boston Braves. And he was, at the age of 33, Sam Jethro led the National League in stolen bases. He had great hitting statistics for the 3 years he played in Boston for the Braves. And he was there was a picture of him on the cover of Ebony magazine as baseball's fastest ball player. And he was fast. There were stories about him running the 100-yard dash in less than 10 seconds. He was an amazing athlete, just terribly overlooked because of the color barrier in baseball at the time. So Sam Jethro played those 3 years for the Braves. They then moved to Milwaukee, and they promised him that they were going to call him up to the Milwaukee Braves, but he never got called up. He was later traded to the Pittsburgh Pirates, and he played a couple of games in Pittsburgh. Now that 53 season, he played for the Toledo Mudhens, which was the the Milwaukee Braves AAA team. And there's a interesting PBS story where they talk about the Mudhens and how great a ball player he was in Toledo and how well loved he was by the Toledo fans. But after he was signed by Pittsburgh, he spent most of the rest of his career in Toronto playing in the National League. But if there's a ball player that's been overlooked by baseball, it's certainly Sam Jethro. And the Cleveland Buckeyes won that 1945 World Series. And to kind of show you how the World Series was set up, games 1 and 2 were played here. So they played the first game here at Leaf Park, which the Buckeyes won. Game 2 was, game 2 was 2 days later, where the Buckeyes played the Homestead Grays and beat them again. But like I said before, in the day between, the two teams went to Dayton, where they played an exhibition game. Now, an interesting thing for you baseball fans, you baseball scores, about game 2 here at League Park. The game was tied going into the bottom of the 9th inning. Quincy Troop led off the bottom of the 9th with a double. So the game's 2-2, and he went to third on a wild pitch. The next 2 batters were intentionally walked, and Eugene Bremer, who was the pitcher, he came to bat in the bottom of the 9th with basically nobody out. And the fans were kind of upset because they really would have preferred a non-pitcher to hit in that situation. Well, Bremer went ahead and hit what is known as a ground rule double. The ball landed, went over the fence, and if you look at the score of the game, even the one here at the Baseball Heritage Museum, it's listed as 4-2. You go to some other news outlets and newspapers from the time, Call and Post, and the final score is 3-2. And it was driving me crazy, is why was there a difference between the scores being reported? And the reason is, back then, a player only got credited for a hit only as far as he had to go to score a run. So he only needed, since Bremer only needed to get to first base, a lot of the scores of that day from that game showed as a 3-2 final instead of a 4-2 final. The teams then went to Pittsburgh, where they were going to play game 3, and that was the Homestead Grays home field. They played both in Pittsburgh and Washington, but that game was rained out, so game 4 was scheduled in Washington. It was raining that day. It was at Griffith Stadium, and in Griffith Stadium, it was raining, and they had to wait for the Tigers and Senators game to be over so they could start their game. Now, there was a lot of objections, obviously, at the time to integrating baseball. One was economic. Clark Griffith, the guy that owned the Senators, and he was no friend of African Americans, we've learned. But by owning a stadium, one reason some of these stadium owners were against integration is they knew the Negro Leagues would disappear and they would lose a customer because Negro League baseball provided a lot of income for these teams, for the owners of these stadiums. So that's one. There was a lot of economic interest, both in integrating Major League Baseball and not integrating it, depending on how you were affected financially. But after that game, the Buckeyes won that game, and then they went to Philadelphia to play Game 4 of the World Series, and they won that game. They shut the Homestead Grays out. And I appreciate what they have here at the Baseball Heritage Museum. I had the hardest time finding a box score from Game 4. It's not in the local paper, and most of the information I get about the Buckeyes is from the Cleveland Call and Post. But there were 2 second basemen named Jackson on that Philadelphia Stars team. One of them made an error in the first inning, and it was Bozo Jackson, and that's what they reference here. The baseball reference refers to the other second baseman named Jackson. Jelly Jackson, I believe, was what he was called. But he wasn't the one that made the error. But like I said, the Buckeyes then won the Negro League World Series, and that was their best year. And in 1947, they went on to win the American League, the American Negro League Championship, and lost the World Series that year. But as I mentioned, the nature of Negro League baseball, what do the Buckeyes have to do in Philadelphia after they win Game 4? They have to go back out and play the Philadelphia Stars, the Negro National League team, in an exhibition game. And games 6 and 7 were scheduled in New York, and back here in Cleveland, and those became exhibition games. So the team didn't get a break from not playing ball games. They had to just keep playing because they committed to playing those games. And the interesting thing about the Philadelphia fans in that last World Series game is it was reported they would not throw baseballs back when they were hit into the stands. So that because back then, you know, baseballs were expensive and teams that wanted to spend more money on baseballs than they had to. Now, a couple of questions I regularly get from fans about the Buckeyes and the Negro Leagues is, did white players play for the Negro League teams? And as a matter of fact, in 1946, the Cleveland Buckeyes did sign a white ball player, a gentleman named Eddie Klipp. I use it, we're gentlemen kind of loosely here. Eddie Klipp was no Jackie Robinson, but in one of the exhibition games the Buckeyes played in Erie, Eddie Klipp pitched against them, and the owner of the team was pretty impressed with him. So he said he invited him to go to the spring training in 1946 with the Buckeyes. Now, Eddie Klipp had some interesting habits. One, he liked to drink a lot. Two, he didn't particularly care to work very much, and he liked to play baseball. And I think he was regularly being chased around for not supporting his family. But he went with the Buckeyes down to spring training, and an interesting incident happened in Birmingham. Recently we learned John Lewis passed away. He was one of the survivors of what they call Bloody Sunday. But the person in charge of public safety in Birmingham at the time was a guy named O'Connor, who also was involved in the Bloody Sunday event. And when O'Connor found out that there was, in a sense, an integrated team playing at Birmingham, he went there, chased Eddie Klipp off the playing field, and out of the dugout and said, we don't allow mixed teams to play here in Birmingham on these baseball fields. So Eddie Klipp spent that afternoon sitting in the stands, probably, and obviously the whites only section, probably being heckled by the white fans that went to that game. Eddie Klipp's career with the Buckeyes was short-lived. He only pitched in one exhibition game for the Buckeyes. He did pitch in a game in Grand Rapids against the Chicago American Giants, and he had a good outing there. It was an exhibition game, but when he was brought into a game in 1946 to pitch in Indianapolis against the Clowns, he came in with the bases loaded, didn't pitch very effectively, gave up a couple runs, and soon thereafter he was released by the Buckeyes. But there is actually a song online honoring Eddie Klipp, even though honoring I think is, I mean, I respect the fact he played, but it certainly wasn't what Jackie Robinson went through when he integrated the major leagues. And another question I get from Negro League fans is about Willie Mays. Did Willie Mays ever play here for the Birmingham Black Barons? Interestingly, and if anyone knows anyone who ever attended a Negro League game here in League Park, please have them contact me. I'm sure there's still some people around who may remember that. I was contacted by a gentleman a few years ago who came to the 1948 opening day here in League Park, and he asked me if Willie Mays had played in that game because he knew Willie Mays played for the Birmingham Black Barons that year. Well, the 1948 opening day here, Delbert Spurlock was the gentleman's name that asked me this question, he was disappointed. He was 7. He came over here with his family. He was to see a baseball game, and when he got here, he said, "Well, where's Larry Doby?" Larry Doby being his favorite black ball player, and his family said, "Well, Larry Doby's not playing in this game. This is the Cleveland Buckeyes, and Larry Doby plays for the Indians." And in 1948, it was the end of, kind of the beginning of the end for Negro League ball. And when I do my research in the Call and Post, one of the frustrating things is, from a research standpoint, but very understandable, is once baseball integrated in Cleveland, when Larry Doby got signed, the Cleveland Call and Post put all its efforts into following Larry Doby and kind of left the Cleveland Buckeyes behind. And that's understandable. There was so much interest in integrating baseball during that era, and I'm sure the Call and Post had their own issues getting their writers into press boxes, which were probably segregated up until that time, and so they did a lot of work following Larry Doby around. So, but opening day, since we're talking opening day 1948, it's actually a doubleheader. The mayor of Cleveland threw out the first pitch, and the gentleman Delver Spurlock asked me about that game, because all he remembers was a long day and all the smoking of cigars that was going on in the stadium at the time, which was quite common even for us that are older. At the old municipal stadium, went to games, people smoking, and but he said it was also a long day, and he had to stand up because he was so short compared to everyone else. But it turned out the reason it was a long day was actually a doubleheader. I did my research though, and Willie Mays was signed by the Birmingham Black Barons after he was in high school, and he came up here to play what would have been his first road game with the Barons, and I don't think they had any regular season games before that, so he was up here, and there's a reference in the Negro League database to a player that played in left field for the Birmingham Black Barons, and he decided he was fatigued and left the game early and then played in the second game. And once again, this is a scenario where I can't get the box score from game 2 because there's just none of these box scores exist. But it does show that Willie Mays did pinch hit for this left fielder in game 1 of that World Series, and got into a double play if anyone's curious. And then just by the fact that reading in the Negro League E-Museum that reference page that the ball player left a doubleheader for being fatigued, I would be willing to guess that Willie Mays then did start the second game here. So Willie Mays' first major league start may have been here at League Park when he was with the Birmingham Black Barons. So those are some of the things I'd like to talk about, and I know that we have time for, they're looking for questions. Are there any questions? Or?
There are not any questions.
Okay. This is an interesting reference. I wish I could find more of these. I don't know if anyone has this, but this is actually a Negro baseball pictorial that has reviews the 1944 season. This is the year going into the 1945 season where the Cleveland Buckeyes won the Negro League World Series. And of course, Sam Jethro. Sam Jethro, I can't say enough of. He was just such a great ball player and very much overlooked. And Cleveland fans really got to see Sam Jethro play at his best. And it's unfortunate that most of America didn't, even though at the age of 33, leading the National League in stolen bases and being one of the hitting leaders in Major League Baseball at the time, just shows you what a great ball player and how he's really been overlooked by the Baseball Hall of Fame. So we have no more questions. I'll probably wrap this up. And I want to thank everyone for watching. Once again, thank my hosts for Reagan and Ricardo for inviting me here, and I hope you enjoy this. And once again, if you have any questions after this, I'm at clevelandbuckeyesbaseball.com, and please come here and enjoy the Baseball Heritage Museum.
So the Baseball Heritage Museum is open Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays from 9 to 3. We would also like to thank the Cuyahoga Arts and Culture for making this possible. Please feel free to visit us on Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. And we are also at baseballheritagemuseum.org. If you would like to check out our website, we have lots of very awesome resources there. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next time.